Hi everyone, I'm Amy,
And I'm Audrea.
and this is the Right Crowd. So grab a cup of coffee,
Or a cup of tea.
very large cup of tea, maybe a little something on the rocks, and let's get started. Okay, that was a very big cup of tea.
It is actually, it's delightful. It's like a fruity tea. It's a regular tea, but then they put like grape stuff in it. It's delightful. And it's hot. And so it's summer, it's iced tea.
I don't do fruity tea,
Mm. I don't
just
normally, but that's good.
especially when people go, "Oh, do you want some peach tea?" I'm like,
Oh, yeah, I like peach. I love peach.
"No, I'll eat a peach. I don't want it in my tea." All right, enough of that.
Speaking of peaches, this is a peach of a book. That's actually what we're talking about today.
Yay! Okay, you have to say your name because I can't. It is written by.
It is written by Helen Scheuerer. And Helen, I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name. I should have looked it up phonetically, but it's Helen Scheuerer. Um, and she has written a couple of books. We bought both of them. I have both of them. How to write a successful series and also how to launch a successful series. So today we are talking about how to write a successful series. And you can see from all my tabs that I enjoyed this book. Some of my tabs are kind of invisible because they're that really light green color. But anyway, let's get started with this book. So I would say that the How to Write a Successful Series book is for any new author who wants to start writing a series or has questions about it. If you are already a best-selling series writer, you might not get quite as much out of it, but she gives some gotchas, some lessons learned, and lots of detail in here. So there's probably a lot you could learn even if you are a successful writer in here about planning a series, launching a series, etc. So let's dive in, shall we? I like that it's on page 4. She points out the differences between series. Um, so if you are not a person who reads a lot of series, or you might not know the differences. For example, there's a dynamic series, and this is when the arc spans multiple books, and each book builds upon the last. And then there's the static series, and even though you follow the same character through multiple books, they don't have a big arc. So there's not a big metamorphosis they go through. The character is pretty much the same, which, if you recall from one of our other episodes, we talked about a flat arc character. So a flat arc character would be the static series, where it's more like episodic or installments, and they're not, James Bond is not going to start being a monogamous person who doesn't kill people by the end of the series. He's going to be saying book from book, book, or movie. And then, of course, there's outliers. And then she also breaks down serials versus series because they are different. So that was all in chapter 1. And she gives a little bit about herself. By the way, she is a best-selling author of some fantasy series. And I think one of them is the Oramir Chronicles. All right, so that was chapter 2 or 1. In chapter 2, and again, we're not going to go chapter by chapter, but I just, in those 2 chapters, I did like that she gives you a good basis for why you should write a series. Like, the series make more money, you can pull readers through, and you already know the characters and things like that. So that's what I got from those first 2. Let's go on to where you picked up.
So I like in chapter 3, she talks about writing a series kind of feels like taking a risk because each one is based on the success of the previous one, right? So she talks about in chapter 3 some of the things you could do to minimize your risk, which I liked, especially the fact that she's saying don't pay a lot for advertising in the beginning, because now this could also go against what I've heard other people say, right? You got to get all the information out there about about your book and all that stuff. What she's saying is she'll say this later, save that for like your 3rd or 4th book, But when your series is first coming out, take your time with it. Don't spend a lot of money on it. Let people get their feet wet with it. And then when you get to your third or fourth book in the series, you advertise the bejesus out of it.
Yeah.
You spend all your money on it. And then you go back and point people to books 1 and 2. And I like that she gives you a list of things to think about to minimize your risk in the beginning when you're first starting that series.
I did too. She also gives you, if you never thought of writing a series, she gives you some ideas in that chapter 3 of you could write interconnected standalones, or they could be not the same character, but they could all occur in the same location, which is what a lot of romance writers do. And I like the risk stuff that she talked about. She makes writing a series accessible, I think, with this. I really do like how she broke it down, and she just made it more relatable.
But kind of with what you just said, it's kind of the difference between like the Hunger Games series. It's the same character, same place, same everything, right? But with James Bond, he's not in the same place in 2 books.
Oh, yeah.
It's the same couple of characters. And there's actually multiple people who write James Bond now. And as long as they get some of the same things right, it doesn't matter, right? As long as he has found a woman somewhere in there.
Yep.
He's chasing somebody. There's a martini involved, and somewhere they're going to talk about him and all the special tools, right? You now have a James Bond book. Like it's not always in the castle on the seaside, right? It's the character that moves along. And I know this because I listen to James Bond on my way home from work to like.
Do you really?
I do. I won't read James Bond, but I'll listen to James Bond.
Never thought
There's
about
a couple of things that I listen to that I wouldn't actually read, but I will listen to. If I were to read it, it would not hold my attention.
Interesting. I love James Bond movies. I tried to read the books, but they're back when they were being written by, oh gosh, what's his name? What's his name?
Ian Fleming.
Ian Fleming. They were pretty misogynistic. So I had a hard time reading those books. So I just watched the movies. And when I was a little girl, I wanted to be a James Bond when I grew up. I wanted to be the girl, the African-American girl version of James Bond. So I might have to look into the audiobooks.
All right. I've only actually watched 2 James Bond movies.
Everyone I've seen
probably listened to 10 books.
Many times. Interesting.
Halle Berry. She was the first James Bond movie that I watched.
Really?
Because I like her.
I like Halle too.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to go on James Bond. But that's just an example of different types of series.
Yes.
Like you can have the series that's in the world, or you could have a series that like Reacher. It's the character. Every book he's in a different place. You're following the character. It's a series about the character. So I like that. One of the things that she points out in, what chapter am I in? Chapter 4. Is she says, don't make the mistake I did of bowing to expectations or paying attention to other people's shoulds or being pressured by a hot trend. She says, write what you love reading.
Yeah.
And that makes a lot of sense. Your brain's already there anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Why wouldn't you write what you like to read? I mean, I got to read it when I write it. I might as well enjoy it.
Yes, I agree. And I like she gives you a little Venn diagram of what you should write. And I love that she did that on it's page 29. And for you guys who are new to the channel, this is we're the Right Crowd, and we do writer or author craft book club stuff. So this is your book club if you're into writing and so forth. So that's why we go through page numbers and chapters and things. It's a YouTube book club. Okay. So she is the Venn diagram, and what she's brought together are what you love reading meets genres that sell. And in the middle is the sweet spot. So that's where you might write something. And actually I picked what I was going to write obviously many years before I read this book.
We're not going to talk about that.
Nope. And that's how I came up with it, because I love reading mysteries, all mysteries, and cozy mysteries sell really well. And they have them for basically every topic under the sun. And I wanted to write a cozy mystery that I had not had yet to see. And that was because I wanted a certain kind of character and a certain level of snark and so forth. And that wasn't in the cozy mysteries I was reading. And that's how I came up with it. And it's a sweet spot for me. We'll see what the readers say. All right. So do you want?
Yes, and they will tell us.
Yeah, I will tell us. All right. So the next chapter, she talks about research, which is always good. And I highlighted what to, so she suggests, like many authors or writing classes will tell you to do when you do your research, to find your comps or complementary or competition books that would be your comparables in your market or your genre. And she gives you some great questions to ask. And I'll just mention a couple. And as we always say, we don't read the whole book to you, because if we like the book and we think you should buy it, like this one, go buy the book and tell Helen we sent you. But we just dip our toe in for you guys, but we've read the whole book. Okay, so questions you should ask. I actually lost.
Usually we've read the whole book. There's been a couple where.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that on the next. And we don't do book club reviews of books we don't like. We just, you'll never hear about.
There are books we have started and we have messaged or Marco Polo'd each other and been like, is this one doing anything for you? Because it's not doing anything. And then the other was like, oh, I didn't want to say anything, but no, I don't like, it's not that we don't like it. It's just not doing anything for us. Like, and so we're like, okay, well then let's move on. What book do we want to do instead? Yeah. So.
All right, so on page 37, questions to ask about your comp series. You find a series that is comparable to the one you want to write in the same genre, same type of structure, etc. And that's one of the questions you should ask. What is the common structure? Are the series, the ones you've chosen, are they dynamic or static? So for example, for me, when I was looking at cozy mysteries, I found that the ones that I liked were, the character was for the most part static. So the character didn't change. She had that flat arc, kind of like a James Bond or Jack Reacher. But sometimes the characters around them would change. Another question to ask, do they follow the 3-act structure? And what types of endings are there? Cliffhangers or happy ever afters? And she suggests you read the reviews of your comp titles, and even ask or look at what tropes are used in the books. That some great questions. I tabbed that one because I have to redo my comps because the book has taken more than a month to write, believe it or not, years. But anyway, so I have to redo my comps to make sure that the comps that I chose when I started writing the series are still viable comps for the book as it releases this year. So
Now, right before she gives you that list, she goes over how to find your comps.
yes.
Right. So she talks about actually going into the bookstore and looking in the section that you think your book falls into, going into the Amazon and seeing what also was bought from the book that you think is like yours. Like, do they all fall into the same thing? So she gives you a couple of ideas of how to find those comp titles. Because if you don't know how to find one, it's hard to compare your book to a comp title if you don't know what that even means or how to get there. She goes past that into world building, because she actually lists for you at the beginning of this chapter the different types of research that you should be doing besides just comps. One of them is world building. And she talks about it is crucial to the overall movement of your series is knowing the broader world that you're writing. Like, you need to know what the big picture is so that you make sure that as you write it, it falls into those pieces. And we're not going to edit this out, but can you hear my husband getting tape? Okay, cool. All right, let's keep going. I hear him, and I just want to make sure you can't hear him. Okay, go ahead.
All right. So I think if you are not writing a fantasy book or a science fiction book, you're writing a contemporary series, you might be tempted to skip over anything in here about world building. But I caution you, do not do that, because I made that mistake when I first started writing. I thought, well, I'm not building a world. We're not going to have magic systems, etc. But you still need to build a world for a contemporary series, especially a standalone, maybe not, but a series, because you're going to have the same people. You have to have a coffee shop, or maybe it's a bar or a bistro, and you have to, have the kind of house, the kind of area. If somebody is in like a mystery or a thriller, are they going to get trapped in the woods or fall over a cliff? Is there an ocean? So you still have to build a world for those contemporary books too.
Yep.
And I
Yep.
really I almost skipped over that research chapter, because I thought, well, I've done all my research. But there was some good stuff in there. So don't skip it.
Yeah, there's all kinds of research that you can be doing. It's not just like there's so many bits and pieces. So make sure you pay attention to that. Something that she talks about in the inspiration research section is that she says it involves anything and everything you do to spark new ideas that flutter in your chest, that feeds the excitement for your upcoming series. So if what you're writing now, I'd say this with a caveat. There are some things that we have been writing for so long that the only feeling we have in our chest is, ugh, like I'm still doing the same thing. And the only reason I know this, and she's hiding her face, is because we're both sometimes there.
Yeah.
But when we started writing it, and when we write new stuff in it, the flutter comes. Like you get excited about the stuff that's coming out of your brain, because when you're writing a book, it's all from you. I mean, unless you're plagiarizing, and then, I can't help you with that.
Don't do that.
But when you're writing a book, it's all coming from you. And so it should build some sort of internal excitement for you about the things coming out. So she says that your inspiration research should make you excited for the things that you're discovering about what you're about to write.
I agree. And in that same section, I highlighted, there's a quote, or what she says is one of the things we didn't mention, at many of these chapters, she has a beginning quote or drop quote from other authors. But this one is, what I'm slowly realizing is the importance of acknowledging the long game. And I really like that. And it goes on for a little bit further, but that's from the author diaries, and that's in that section too. So that's chapter 5. Anything else in chapter 5?
Nope.
Okay. At the beginning of chapter 6, I just wanted to mention this one drop quote, or there's another word for it that I can't recall. But anyway, it's planning is your best friend if productivity is your goal. And that's from Chris Fox. He's written many authorcraft books and productivity books, but one of the ones she's quoting from is 5,000 words per hour, write faster, write smarter. Anyway, that chapter 6 is all about planning your series, and there's some really good tips and diagrams in there. Did you want to go over anything in chapter 6?
I had a couple of things highlighted, but there's nothing. What I think the thing that I want to point out is I'm a pantser. And so when I was like planning, I'm like, I'm not planning anything. Like you just write it. However, I am discovering in the book that I've now been writing for, is I'm not admitting for how long, a little bit of a plan in the beginning would have been helpful, because now I'm having to go back and fill in and rediscover parts because I didn't plan anything in it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that some planning, even if it's basic, we're going to go from point A to point B to point C, or this is where we're starting and this is where we're ending, and this is how I think we're getting there. Like just something along the lines. And she does go into pantsers in this. So it's not just for people who plan. One of the things that obviously you need to figure out your type of series and what category you want to write in, because you need to make sure you hit the right beats and the right arcs for whatever the category is that you're writing in. The other thing that she points out is that knowing the destination of your arc will help you lay the foundation you need at the beginning. So if you know your end destination, it's like going to grandma's house. You know where you're going, so you're able to plan and map out how to get there. So yeah, so I'm like looking at this chapter. I'm like, maybe I had more to say in this chapter than I thought I did.
I know. I highlighted a lot of this book. I really like this book, you guys. I really did. She gives lots of great tips. The
Yeah.
next one, or the next one I was going to talk about, is the planning your series. And we said we were going to go chapter by chapter, but I could go chapter by chapter on this one because there's good stuff in every chapter.
Yeah.
But I really like how she does a plan your series with me in this book. And she uses an example, as one of the examples she uses is, she uses her books a lot, but is Harry Potter. And she talks
Yeah.
about like the Prisoner of Azkaban and the other books in the series and what's the inciting incident of each of those. And so it's a great exercise and illustration of a series and how it could have been planned if you put yourself in the mind of J.K. Rowling.
She also gives you a list of questions to ask about yourself, about your character and your
Yes.
characters, to make sure that the other thing is that I'm realizing and that I should have done in the beginning is, as I'm writing stuff down, because I am a pantser, as I'm writing stuff down, I needed to be making notes about what I was writing down. So I don't have to go back and read what I wrote, so I could remember what I wrote.
Yeah.
Like character cards, like I don't necessarily make them ahead of time, but as a character comes into the story, I need to write it down. I need to write down where they came from, what they're doing. I need to stop and think about the character.
Yeah.
So later, if they have a part later, I don't have to go, okay, wait, what was the point of this guy? Like why is he here? Did I say anything about him before that would keep him from doing what it is I'm saying he's doing now? Like,
Yeah.
if I'm doing sci-fi fantasy and basically the world is my oyster. You can do whatever you want. I make my own rules in a sci-fi and in a fantasy. So, but I got to make sure that I don't say this guy does this now when in the last chapter he was someone completely different. I'm just using the same name.
Or he couldn't do that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even though you're making stuff up, you need to be consistent.
Yeah.
And yeah. Because I've done that. I've read books because I read paranormal fantasy, paranormal fiction, some fantasy. And like I read one just recently about, it was two women, they were best friends, and one turns out to be a wizard and she gains other powers. And the other one turns out to be a werewolf. Just so happens that these things come together to make this stuff happen, or it all, or the wizard was always a wizard, she just didn't know it. Anyway, in one of the books in the series, the werewolf could not do something, so she couldn't help her friend. But I think the writer must have realized she had done something early on, because she said she couldn't do it, but then she made it so she couldn't do it because she couldn't be there. So there was some other really important wolf pack thing that was happening, so she could not be there to help her friend or to do the thing that she says now she couldn't do. But anyway, so yeah, a series Bible is an important tool if you're going to write a series, and she mentions that in here. Start your series Bible with book one, so that your character has brown eyes in book one, and book five, they're a beautiful shade of emerald green.
There better be a reason. She does also go over making a series story arc.
Mm-hmm.
So say you want 5 books in it, going through and saying what each book is going to get you from point A to point, what is that, E? Like what each book is going to do to carry your series along. It's a little more planning than a pantser normally would do. However, if you wanted to actually say you just want 5 books, you need to know where it's going to end. Now, if you're like, I'm just going to write until I'm done, then, I mean, maybe you don't have to be but if you've got like, I want this to be a 5-book series, you need to plan out what you want that to look for.
And she titled this one, you can do anything you want to do with any of these books that we talk about in any of these author classes or conferences we go to. The messages are pretty consistent for the most part, but sometimes there's some left field stuff, and you can always take the advice with a grain of salt. But she wrote, the book is titled How to Write a Successful Series. So she wrote the stuff that she knows works. So you can do whatever you want to do, and because you're the boss of you. But I love that she gives you tips that she's gotten from other authors and herself that will help you to write a successful series.
She actually says in the beginning of this that people had asked her so many questions about what she was doing that she was like, fine, I'll put it in a book. She also says when she's talking about coming up with your series arc, that she suggests you come up with the inciting incident, midpoint, and climax for each book in your series. Even if you don't want to do anything else, you should at least know those pieces of the books in your series.
What chapter are you on? I'm sorry.
I'm trying to get to the end of okay, so that's in chapter 7.
Okay.
And I'm now in chapter 8. So do you have anything else in 7 you wanted to point out?
Nope, I was in 12.
Oh, okay, let me catch up.
8 was good. 8 is good. No, and she's broken the book into sections too, which I think is helpful. And we didn't mention that at first. So as we enter to as we get out of chapter 8, chapter 9 starts section 3, writing your series and must-have elements. And in that section, she talks about all of the stuff that you should have in your series. And chapter 9 starts with, or it says, all starts with book 1.
She does quotes from different authors throughout this. And in the little title page for section 3, I think this is important. Terry Pratchett, quoted in Sue Hurt's Right Choices, Elements of Nonfiction Storytelling, said, "The first draft is just you telling yourself the story."
Yeah.
And I think some people don't want to admit that.
I wish somebody had told me that years ago, because I was trying to write the first draft to be ready to publish.
The book. Yeah.
This is the book. It has to be perfect. No. The first draft is just you telling yourself the story.
Now, it could end up being pretty close.
Yeah.
But there's not too many people I know. I mean, Craig Martell, I think he probably does a first draft and just publishes it. But he's also written 50 gazillion books. So, I mean,
yeah,
who's to say his first 10 weren't like that, where what he finally published was the 50th version of what he wrote. You know what I mean? So she does point out in this chapter, she says, your series opener will set the stage for the rest of your series, not only in terms of your story arc and character development, but for your sales and financial success.
So no pressure.
No, none whatsoever. Basically, what she's saying is make it good so they want to read the second one.
Yeah.
Because if it's not, take your time to make it the way it needs to be. Because if it's not, they won't get to the second one. And as someone who reads almost 100 books a year, I can tell you, I won't go to the second one it's very rare that I will go to the second one if the first one didn't capture me the way it needed to capture me.
That's true. I have bought books on sale and I've stopped doing this because I've gotten burned. I will see a book and it will look like it's just right, perfect for me. And it's a series. And so they're on sale. So I'll buy the first 2 or 3. And then I sit down and I read that first one. And I am so sorry I bought book 2 and 3. And yeah. So yeah. Anyway, let's move on to chapter 11. Or I actually skipped chapter. Well, I didn't skip it when I read it. I'm just passing it over. But it's about doing a series Bible, and she's got quotes from Sarah Cannon in there.
Oh, Sarah Cannon, our
friend Sarah Cannon. We don't know.
No, we don't know. I do want to say at the end of chapter 9, I have this one highlighted. She said, writing and publishing your series is the best thing you can do for your career.
Yeah, I suppose it is. Yeah.
Isn't that like you think, well, of course it is. And then, but if you really think about it, it actually is. Because say you move on to your second or third series, and I really like what you've written. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go back in your backlist. I'm going to read everything.
Yeah.
Right? If I liked it. There have been a couple of series that weren't necessarily what I would read. And I'd end up catching like book 3 or 4 and be like, ooh, this is not the first one. Where's the first one at? Right. And I'll go back and I'll read all the ones to catch me up to where I am currently. So yes, even though that sounds very obvious, I think it needs to be said.
Yeah.
Which kind of goes along with making sure that your first book in the series, take the time to do it well so that people do want to continue to read your books.
Indeed. Right. some of the good stuff that some of the other good stuff that she's got in here. I really liked in chapter 12, she talked about, I'm just going to read the foreshadowing and the breadcrumbs. She gives a lot of really good detailed advice about how to build that series. And that was another section that I'm like, I wish you had published this book about 5 years ago, 10 years ago. No, because it's got some really good stuff.
I haven't written anything 10 years ago.
It's got some really good stuff in there, and it's got good stuff about loops, open loops for a series, and cliffhangers, and when to use them and not make your readers angry. Although I've heard from other authors that some readers get angry about cliffhangers and they're like, oh darn it has a big cliffhanger, I hate cliffhangers, but they always buy the next book.
Well, yeah, because they hate the cliffhanger, but they want to know what happened.
Yeah.
I do want to go back to the last page of
Oh,
chapter 11. There's one thing I want to say about chapter 11, which will help with editing, I think. She says, unless a character has a prolonged speaking role or a significant part to play in the narrative, they shouldn't even be named.
Yeah, that's a good tip.
Like, talk about them, but you don't have to give them a name.
Yeah. That is another great tip. I wish I'd known before I had an Excel spreadsheet with 35 characters in it. And that's some of the feedback I got from the editor, which I thought I had caught it, but there were a couple of characters in the book that they didn't really do anything. And she said she knew it was a series, and she said, unless these characters are going to appear in the next book, or you left out something they should do, you could maybe combine them or give their actions to somebody else, because there were a lot of characters in the book, and I had cut down some characters, and because it's a series, so I was planting seeds for future books in there. So it's a great tip.
Okay, we can move on. We get
13. All right. So 13 about cliffhangers. I really like how she talks about there's two types of cliffhangers. Soft cliffhangers and hard cliffhangers. And hard cliffhangers are the ones that make people really hard. I have to buy the next book to see if does Penelope get up off the train tracks or not? The last we saw our intrepid heroine, she was tied to the railroad tracks by whatever the villain is, and Dudley Do-Right.
And she could see the light from the train coming through the tunnel.
And now you have to buy the next book to see what happens. So, and that's a hard cliffhanger. Whereas, and then how you can put cliffhangers, which is another, what do you call it? Another skill or tactic you can use is put cliffhangers at the ends of chapters too, which are really, those are the ones I love to hate. I hate them because they keep me up late at night. Just one more chapter. Okay.
Oh my God. I have
chapter.
Oh my gosh. I have sat up and I don't read James Patterson anymore, but when I used to read James, when my grandmother was still alive, I would read them and send them to her. So she would have books to read, and then she would give them to her local library. But I cannot tell you how many mornings I would be done with a book, a James Patterson book, and I'd put it down and I'd look at the clock. Not even my watch. Like, I'd look at the clock and it'd be like 4 o'clock in the morning. And I'd be like,
gosh,
how is it 4 o'clock in the morning? I'm not tired. How did I stay up? You go to bed tired.
Yeah.
And you're just going to read a little bit until you fall asleep. And then 5 hours later, you have finished the book.
Yeah. That happened to me with the Harry Potters at first. And then before they started to get longer and longer. But J.R. Rain. Oh my gosh. J.R. Rain. I will not start a J.R. Rain book unless it's like Friday night and I've got the whole weekend off. Got lots of time ahead of me. I'm on vacation. I can start a J.R. Rain book. They're addictive. Anyway, all right. So that was a little bit of chapter 13. I think we got through. As we said, we're not going to go through every chapter and line by line in this book, because we recommend that if you want to write a series,
yeah,
this is a good one. This is a really good book. I will be referring to this. This is now a reference book for me. But this book, we've gone through chapter 13. This book has 27 chapters and also bonuses and recommended resources. So now let's pick some more favorite chapters or things from towards the end, because we want to leave them wanting more.
I want to say, because we're talking about, so it's chapter 16, writing a killer series ending. And kind of coming off of Cliffhanger. There's a quote at the beginning by Rachel Aaron from the 2010K Writing Faster, Writing Better, and Writing More of What You Love. The beginning of the quote says, audiences want closure. If you don't give it to them, if you try to cheat them on the resolution, it doesn't matter how well you pulled off anything else, they will hate you forever.
Yep.
You don't want that.
Agree.
Give people closure. I think even in a cliffhanger, you can still give people a little bit of a closure.
Yes. Yeah. And a series. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say with the series, you have the luxury of being able to string some things out. Like, will they or won't they wind up married or together? May start in book 1 and you might not close that loop until maybe book 4 or book 5, or it may go all the way to book 15. But at the end of every book, if you started with like a romance of another 2 characters or murder of a character, at the end of that book, you have closed that loop. That is a whole book. But there's something in that book, like the town is getting a new gymnasium, or will they? I'm sorry, that's not a really interesting thing. Like, who cares? But there could be something.
I mean, it could be a middle grade book. That could be something that was.
That's true. Or, maybe a long lost father that might still be alive and they come back in like book 7 or something like
right.
that.
So she does go over some common pitfalls in chapter 16. And that's what chapter 16 is, common pitfalls. And then she moves into section 4, which is about writing longer series and how you can do that. She gives you some tips for how to do that. And she points out again, make sure you write what you love. If you don't want to read it, if you don't want to write it, nobody's going to want to read it. If you're tired of writing it, they're going to be tired of reading it. Exactly. So make sure you're writing what you love. And then she goes into your second series and beyond. She talks about reader magnets. Do you have anything you want to say about any of that?
No, I don't.
Okay.
It was all good stuff. I mean, I really did like the stuff she talked about, reader magnets. We talked about that before on this channel. And
she gives you mistakes to avoid.
Yes.
And tips for how to do it and how to do it well. And she quotes Sarah Cannon again.
Yes, she does. She's got some great charts and resources in here. And for those of you who might be really new to publishing a book and you might not know about an ISBN or an ASIN and all that stuff, she does talk to you about that and about how to keep track of that and where to publish your book. So it progresses from starting to get an idea for a series all the way through to you're ready to publish the series. And here's some tactical, is that a word? Tactical? Actual things. You put them together, tactical and actual. It's tactical.
I mean, you just created your own world. I like it.
You're welcome. So anyway, and she's got great resources in the back. So for example, in the recommended resources, she has books recommended by other authors like Save the Cat writes a novel. Has anybody heard of that before? Check our channel. There's a video on that one.
Pretty sure there's a video or 2.
Or 3, yeah. And then tools, she recommends some writing things like Asana, Notion, Scrivener. So, and some other resources for authors that she mentions in the back. And again, I'm so sorry, Helen, if we're mispronouncing your name.
She also gives a chart for ongoing production. So like, because if you're writing book 3, that doesn't necessarily mean that book 2 is already published. It could be in a different spot, right? You're writing book 3, but maybe book 2 is still with your beta readers. Yeah. So she suggests keeping up with a production chart so that you know where you are in each one. And she gives you a list of kind of what should be part of that chart or what she uses as part of that chart. Mm-hmm. So I like that she did that. I'm just trying to see if there's anything else I think that needs to be. Oh, and of course she goes through mistakes that she made and lessons learned.
And I like it when authors include that stuff because you can learn from them or not feel alone.
Questions that she's received about it, and then she gives you all of her reference materials. Okay, I got to the end.
Okay.
Is there anything else?
No, it's almost dog-eared, this book. I don't have anything else on this one other than I really like it. So writing strategies for authors. And again, she has this one and at least one other in her author craft book. So how to write a successful series. And then your next step after you've written it is how to launch a successful series, and we might come back and do that one at another time. So,
Okay, so yeah, I liked it.
and also like and subscribe.
Yeah. Oh, wait, we're gonna, for anybody who's on Substack, we're on Substack. Go
Yes.
find our Substack.
We have a newsletter. We'll put it in the comments.
Yeah. Okay, that's it.
Bye.
Bye.